So this is the iPhone XS, Apple's 2018 flagship model, and the first iPhone that really saw the notched iPhone come into its own. However, all these years later and now at a much cheaper price, should you consider buying one of these in 2020 and using it as your daily driver? Let's find out. Alright, so first of all, as usual, we have the specs. The iPhone XS features an Apple A12 Bionic processor, 4GB of RAM, variable storage options with 64, 256 and 512GB, and again, as usual, while we will be discussing performance in more detail later on, it is nice to have a varied amount of storage, because I never find that I need more than 64GB. But if you're a big mobile gamer, then you might want more. It comes in 3 colors, which are essentially black, white, and gold, which is my personal favorite, as you can probably tell. And it weighs in at 177 grams, which actually isn't too heavy for an iPhone, and I've never found I have any hand fatigue issues. As for the specs, that's pretty much it. If you've been here before, then you know I like to keep this section short so we can get right into the fun stuff. Okay, so next up we have design, build quality, and button layout. As I said at the start of this video, the iPhone XS was the second flagship notched iPhone ever, and so while there have certainly been some improvements made since the iPhone XS was released, I still think that this design does look very premium. I love the glass front and back, and holding this thing without a case, although not advised, is a really nice experience. It also does have a stainless steel bezel, and all in all, this thing does just scream quality. Well, of course, it does feature that rounded off edge and the original one-piece tic-tac camera before they were separated off in the iPhone 11. I do still really enjoy the design of the iPhone XS in 2022. It also does feature an IP68 water resistance rating, so if you get this thing wet coming out the shower, then you should be good. Just don't go cave diving with this thing. That's my latest fascination. Seeing as this thing was pre-iPhone 12, none of the glass here is ceramic shield, so all the more reason to put this thing in a case. But overall, I think the design and the build quality of the iPhone XS is still pretty good. In terms of button layout, we get an isolated lock button, separate volume up and down buttons, and a mute switch, so pretty typical for a notched iPhone. All the buttons do feel nice and tactile, although something I have noticed is that typically on these stainless steel bezel iPhones, they aren't quite as tactile as on their aluminium counterparts. But all in all, very standard button layout with excellent quality. After this, we have the screen. The iPhone XS features a 5.8-inch OLED screen with a resolution of 1125 by 2436, and this thing still looks absolutely phenomenal. This was the second ever OLED iPhone, so it does lack some of the more advanced modern technology that we might see today, but it is still a really nice high-resolution panel with a great level of contrast, and in my opinion, the screen size is ideal. Colors do look really nice. I never really see any pixels, and overall, if you just want a really good looking panel in 2022, then the iPhone XS will be a great option. Of course, it does also feature True Tone. If you're into photography, a fun way to think about this is like auto white balance on a camera. When you have True Tone on, your colors always will look nice and natural no matter what lighting you're in, and I do think this is a really nice feature. The iPhone XS screen also does feature 3D Touch, which has now of course been retired, but it still works well here, and it is a nice quirky feature all the same. So as long as I previously mentioned, you do just want a really nice looking screen without too many of the new exciting features, then the iPhone XS will certainly get the job done in 2022. Next up, we have Face ID, which is of course the main unlock method for this iPhone. While not as good as the current Face ID system that we have today, as it is a little bit more picky with the angles, I do still think the iPhone XS is fine in 2022. It works well in all lighting conditions, and as I said, as long as it's got a clear view of your face, it should probably work pretty well. That said though, also nothing to really write home about either. Okay, so following on, we have a pretty big one on the modern smartphone. The camera. The iPhone XS features a 12 megapixel dual camera system with a wide and telephoto setup, the wide angle having an aperture of f1.8 and the telephoto having an aperture of f2.4. Obviously, this thing does also feature a front-facing camera. This one's 7 megapixels with an aperture of f2.2, which is, as I'm sure most of you are aware, is much lower quality than the 12 megapixels that we get today. That said though, how does this thing actually perform? Well, in terms of taking photos, on both angles you get really good dynamic range really nice colors, a good level of sharpness, and overall I had a lot of fun taking photos with this thing in 2022. Now some of you may notice that the iPhone XS is lacking that ultra-wide camera that we see on 2-camera iPhones today, but as long as you are okay with just standing back a little bit and you don't want to use the ultra-wide for a creative effect, both of the focal lengths on this iPhone are fantastic. I have been a fan of the telephoto lens for a while now, as I found I can get some really nice creative shots with it, and while they may not look as good as on a flagship iPhone today, it is still a really nice camera system. Of course, there is also portrait mode available on this iPhone, and while it is limited to the telephoto angle, you do get to adjust the level of background blur along with having some pretty excellent edge detection, and overall, if you want to fake that DSLR look, then the iPhone XS will absolutely get this job done. Of course, you can also take some selfies with this phone, again with portrait mode available, and while it won't look as good as selfies on modern smartphones, at the end of the day, they are just selfies. In fact, on bad skin days, you could look at this as an advantage. At the end of the day, the iPhone XS does get the job done for social media. Of course, the iPhone XS does also shoot 4K video in up to 60 FPS on both of the main cameras, and again, while it won't really match up that well to modern iPhones, I do still think it looks pretty good, which is kind of impressive for a 2018 smartphone. Also, of course, you do get slow motion in 1080p at up to 240 FPS, and here it looks less good. Then again, phone slow motion just sucks either way in my opinion, but if you do just want to get some fun slow motion shots and you aren't a picky dickhead like I am, then you should have a lot of fun. The front-facing camera, of course, also shoots video, only 1080p and up to 60 FPS here, and again, might be noticing a theme here. It won't look as good as it does on the iPhone 13 line. However, it is still totally fine for some casual vlog insert if you don't have your camera. In fact, here we go. Here's an example. I am using external audio, but this is an on-the-fly example of a real-world application. Overall, I do still think the iPhone S's camera system is still pretty decent in 2022. While it does lack some of the newer and more exciting features like night mode, and while it is behind on the video side of things compared to the newest offerings, if you just want to take some nice casual photos, maybe edit them in Snapseed, then the iPhone XS will do a great job. Following on, we have a really exciting one. OS and app performance. The iPhone XS was of course released back in 2018, so it has had its fair amount of iOS updates. That said though, this thing is going to run iOS 16 once it's released, and I do still think this thing has a decent amount of life left. In terms of actual OS performance, scrolling through the OS, opening up stock apps, and any other system functions worked really well on the iPhone XS. That is something I have typically found really nice about iPhones. Typically, the OS performance does stay pretty damn good throughout the duration of the support cycle, so yeah, that's always good. In terms of more intensive performance, watching 4K videos on this thing was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, of course, it is also partially due to that phenomenal OLED screen, but in terms of performance, I've never had any issues with this thing stuttering or freezing up, other than when I've had crappy internet. I've been on holiday for the last week, and some of the signal where I was, not great. In terms of gaming, for more casual games, this thing totally will get the job done. However, it is important to understand that this thing isn't going to be a gaming powerhouse like a modern smartphone might be. I mean, this hardware is coming on 4 years old at this point. Christ, what happened there? But then again, I have had virtually no issues when playing the Apple Arcade games I like to play. Overall, to summarize, while of course there are better options on the market in terms of performance nowadays, I do still think the iPhone XS does do a pretty damn good job for an almost 4-year-old iPhone. Quickly, going back to the hardware, we have these speakers. The iPhone XS does have that stereo speaker technology that we first saw introduced on the iPhone 7, and while it won't be winning any awards, nor will you be mixing and mastering your album on this thing, I do think for just casually listening to music or watching videos, the iPhone XS is a pretty nice option. I never found myself needing to plug in an external pair of headphones or speakers, so in my mind, that makes a good pair of built-in speakers. Now, finally, and poetically last, we have the battery life. Now, due to the fact that the iPhone XS can only really be bought used nowadays, I mean, probably at least it has been out of production for several years now, your battery life will greatly depend on the state of the battery. For some reason, the iPhone XS did have a smaller battery than on the iPhone X, coming in at 2,658 mAh, and my iPhone XS, seeing as it has a new battery, does actually last me pretty well. I can usually, with my day-to-day use usage, get through my day fine. Occasionally I do have to charge it during the afternoon on heavier days. So if you have decided that you are interested in buying an iPhone XS, it is a good idea to check the battery health. Overall, I do think the iPhone XS is a pretty phenomenal budget iPhone in 2022. You can pick one of these things up for like $250 on a good day nowadays, and so while it does lack some of the newer features, if you want an iPhone with the core features that make an iPhone good, then the iPhone XS is a pretty good option in 2022. Alright guys, so that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know, by the way, what do you think of the iPhone XS? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? Are you getting one? Do you own one? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading those. As for now though, as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, and smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one.